good morning and welcome to CCTV News. I'm Vambaika Jessa, live in Beijing. Time now is 4 o'clock in the morning. Our first story at the moment. Egypt's largest opposition bloc, the Muslim Brotherhood, has decided not to have real dialogue with the government until Hosni Mubarak leaves office.
The people in the streets all over the country, the people in Tahrir Square are continuing with a very solid will. They have their demands. The president should step aside. He must leave his position.
The uprising in Cairo continued throughout Wednesday. While the government has conducted dialogue with opposition parties while establishing committees to amend the constitution and carry out reforms, the demonstrators say they will keep protesting as long as the 82-year-old Mubarak stays in power. The turmoil has also taken a toll on the country's economy. The central bank intervened on Tuesday to halt a slump by the Egyptian pound. It was the institution's first time in 2 years to back up the nation's currency by pumping in large quantities of US dollars. The French president has urged his ministers to take their vacations in France from now on after recent overseas holidays of several key members of his government attracted heavy criticism in Parliament. Prime Minister François Fillon and Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie were both revealed to have vacationed in Egypt and Tunisia respectively, while both countries were in the midst of anti-government protests.
The French Prime Minister admitted several days ago that he had indeed taken his family on a holiday to Egypt, partly funded by the country's authorities. Meanwhile, during a time when thousands took to the streets to topple the country's long-term ruler, Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie confirmed she had enjoyed a break in Tunisia. The revelations prompted a barrage of criticism in both the French media and in the National Assembly. However, under a stream of questions and opposition calls for resignations, François Fillon defended his position.
I have strictly respected all the rules that are linked to the private trips abroad of the Prime Minister or the President, rules which obey security and diplomatic restrictions.
The criticism has forced President Nicolas Sarkozy to act. He told ministers at a cabinet meeting on Wednesday to prioritise France when picking holiday destinations. Ministers will from now on have to seek clearance from the Prime Minister's office before accepting invitations to visit other countries.
For their holidays from now on, members of the government will have to travel in priority to France. Invitations abroad will be authorized by the Prime Minister, in agreement with the diplomatic section of the French presidency, and their practical details will be examined by the Secretary-General of the government.
The new rule is a clear indication Sarkozy is responding to accusations launched by the opposition. These include the charge that France's international standing has been damaged by the revelations at a time of great social upheaval in both North African countries, and that Alliot-Marie in particular was slow to speak out in support of the anti-government movement in Tunisia. Greg Norman, CCTV.
And as protests in Egypt rage on, many are worried about the condition of one of the world's busiest shipping channels, the Suez Canal. But current reports indicate that the situation at this crucial crossroads for global goods remains calm and undisturbed. This story comes full courtesy of Reuters.
Despite 2 weeks of unrest in Egypt, ports in the Suez Canal are still working almost as normal. The Mediterranean ports like Alexandria and also Damietta and Port Said deal with cargo and handle especially container shipments of produce like grains. That means the shipping industry, crucial to the country's economy, hasn't faced much disruption so far, says Wally Mandrick from Lloyd's List.
During the days when there are protests, when there are demonstrations, where staff have to leave the office early to be able to get home, because otherwise it can take up to 4 or 5 hours to get through the demonstrations to get home. But apart from that, things are all working smoothly.
The 192-kilometre-long Suez Canal is one of the world's busiest waterways and a vital source of foreign currency revenue for Egypt's economy. Tolls collected from the Suez Canal reached $4.3 billion from January to the end of November 2010. So the authorities want to ensure the unrest doesn't force the canal to shut.
From the Egyptian point of view, I think it would be a very serious. It'd be a very serious economic disruption. The canal provides, I think I'm right, in saying about 4%, contributes about 4% to GDP.
Closure of the canal could also cause economic disruption elsewhere. If the canal was closed, cargo ships would have to sail around the Cape of Good Hope, adding an extra 7 days onto journeys between China and Northern Europe. Egypt's also home to the Suez-Mediterranean oil pipeline, and analysts fear closure of the canal or pipeline could lead to a spike in oil prices. That doesn't look likely at the moment, but the Egyptian protests also don't show any signs of stopping.
Well, Baghdad and other Iraqi cities continue to experience a series of demonstrations mirroring recent events in several other Arab countries. In response, the country's prime minister is emphasizing that all protests are legal and should be dealt with respectfully. Baki Naji reports from Baghdad.
The wave of demonstrations in Baghdad and other Iraqi cities are not only against services deterioration, but a recent protest took place in Baghdad concerning delay in paying employees' salaries in the telecommunication company. Other protesters are against negligence in fixing the employment of more than 100,000 temporary workers in the Directorate of Electricity. Protesters said some employment cases have been suspended since more than 8 years, describing that the employment in the governmental institutions needs personal relations.
We're asking the Prime Minister to permanently transfer our employment degrees to the Directorate of Electricity.
We're asking the Prime Minister to find a solution to assist the temporary employees. We need someone to help us. Otherwise, what is the difference from Saddam Hussein's time? He was a bad leader, and now these officials aren't paying our salaries.
Meanwhile, in a press conference at Baghdad municipality this week, Prime Minister Nouri Maliki expressed his prediction that there will be more demonstrations in the coming period. Al-Maliki also said, despite that some of those demonstrations are directed by some sides against the government, we still have to deal with them respectably.
Some demonstrations have demands of decreasing the suffering and deprivation, and some are just. But in each case, whether they are real or addressed, we need a civilized way to deal with these demands, and not to transfer anything to confrontation, because halting them is like bridling the citizens from demanding their rights.
Some demonstrations have demanded the government to find solution to the increasing number of jobless in the country, as the case is behind increasing the rate of crime. Due to continuous wave of demonstrations in Baghdad, the Ministries of Defense and Interior increased the number of checkpoints and stiffened the security measures to be content with any possible riot like the one in Egypt. Baki Naji, CCTV, Baghdad.
The Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has said that his country will take every step necessary to protect its presence on several disputed islands that it's occupied since the end of Second World War. Now, these islands are also claimed by Japan.
And we will take every necessary step to reinforce our presence on the Kuril Islands. This is our strategic position, along with the development of friendly relationships with our neighbours. The one and only condition is that they understand these realities.
The Republic of Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have ended their preliminary military discussions with no significant breakthroughs, as the two neighbors failed to agree on an agenda for their proposed high-level discussions. But signs of a thaw did appear during Wednesday's gathering, as Seoul accepted Pyongyang's proposal to hold Red Cross talks over humanitarian issues. Su Xiaoxiao has more details.
Officials from the ROK and the DPRK held their first round of talks on Tuesday, before agreeing to extend the meeting into another session. But Wednesday's gathering saw the two countries still divided on the same issues: Pyongyang's alleged sinking of a Seoul warship last March, and the November shelling of an inhabited Yangping island. Officials from the Seoul insist that any high-level discussions must include these two incidents, while their northern neighbors suggest a discourse about holding military acts, which can be considered mutual provocation from both sides.
The North criticized us for not changing our position, explained their stance on the Chongnan incident and Yanping Island shelling, and left the meeting room. They unilaterally withdrew.
The South demanded the North's apology over the Chonan and Yongpyong Island incidents, but the North wanted to explain the issues at high-level talks in its own way and wanted to make agendas broader.
But amid the standstill came one positive sign, as the ROK accepted DPRK proposal to hold Red Cross talks over humanitarian issues.
Our government agreed on holding two-way Red Cross talks and sent a letter under the name of the chairman of the ROK Red Cross. We suggested that details, days, and venue be discussed after the military talks.
Wednesday's preliminary colonel-level discussions were meant to lay the groundwork for a future senior military meeting. But it hasn't yet been made clear whether another round of working-level talks will, in fact, be held. Su Xiaoxiang, CCTV.
Welcome back. Russian authorities have reportedly named the man they believe was responsible for the suicide attack on Moscow's busiest airport last month. Well, according to an official working with investigators in the province of Ingushetia, the January 24 bombing of Domodedovo Airport was conducted by 20-year-old Mogmev Yevloev. Chechen rebels had claimed responsibility for the attack that killed 36 people and injured more than 180. A court in Ingushetia also ordered the arrest of Yevloev's 15-year-old brother and 16-year-old sister, who were also suspected of being involved in the attack. A South Sudanese minister has been shot dead in his office in the future country's capital, Juba. Jimmy Lemmy, the Minister of Rural Development, was allegedly shot by his brother-in-law in an attack that also killed a guard. Interior Minister Gir Guang Along said he didn't believe the crime was politically motivated. Lemmy was a former member of the National Congress Party, which dominates North Sudan. He defected to the South Sudan's People's Liberation Movement ahead of elections in April last year. The assassination comes days after the referendum results confirmed that South Sudan will become Africa's newest independent state. Well, continuing with that story, at the beginning of July, South Sudan will officially become the newest country in Africa. And this plan comes after last month's referendum, in which the region's residents voted overwhelmingly to separate from the north. But while the split means celebration for some people, others say it's a sad moment in the country's history. Renee Delcarme reports from the nation's capital.
For decades, Khartoum has been the only capital city of the Sudan. In 5 months' time, this will no longer be the case. Nearly 99% of the people of South Sudan have spoken and voted in favor of self-determination. And as of the 9th of July, Juba will be the capital city of the new nation about to be born in South Sudan. Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir congratulated the people of the South, saying he'd accepted the referendum results because it reflected the will of the people. And as the people of the South celebrated their imminent independence, many Sudanese in the North said they felt a great sense of loss.
I am very sad because Southern is the part of Sudan, and this is politician decision, but we will never leave our brother in the south. I am very sad. This is what they want, and we are happy that they have their independence.
Because we are all the Sudanese and we have residential rights. We can't imagine that one day we be separated.
The South Sudan Referendum Commission says it's proud of the way the people of the Sudan and political leadership of both the North and the South had accepted the referendum results.
There was a lot of fears. We feared, the whole nation was fearing that, given the referendum, the process, and given the kind of the political situation that existed in this country, people thought that violence could erupt any time during the process. But that did not happen. All went very well. The results were willingly accepted, and the whole process is now deemed to have ended as a very nice story, peacefully, calmly, orderly, and in a very civilized manner.
Now that the North and